you know, we've got a programme of business to do, but it is good to have the input from all of you and to help us in our contemplations. I would just like to take apologies. Wendy, do you want to let us know who we have?
Yes, Chair, just a couple of apologies from Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Craddock. Yeah.
Lovely. And could I just actually welcome you back to us, Wendy? It's very nice to have you in Craig's absence on holiday. And it's always good to have you with us. So thank you.
We also had an apology from Mark Axel this morning. He's apparently all ICS chief execs have been called into a meeting with the Secretary of State.
Ooh, okay, interesting. We'll wait and see what comes out of that one. Right, and then can I, yes, Madeline.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I've just spoken to Councillor Jasper. She's had a family emergency, so she may be late or she may not be able to attend. She just asked to confer apologies.
Thank you for that. So noted, Wendy. And
yes, thank you, Chair.
And I also just want to remind everybody that we are going to record this meeting as well, and then it can be posted afterwards on whatever. What's it going to be posted on, Wendy?
Yes, Chair, we record the meeting and the CA has its own YouTube channel website, so it will be available. But if anyone's interested, if they drop me a line afterwards, I can send them the link to the meeting if they'd like that.
Thank you, that's helpful. So you have the chance to be a YouTube star. Okay, then just moving on, any declarations of interest that anyone wants to put forward at this point? I see none. So I'm just going to run through a couple of things which I just wanted to update everybody on. The first is really the very sad loss last week of Roy Wilcox, who was one of the team, and Mubashir, thank you for letting me know about his loss to cancer, which will have affected everybody. He passed away on Monday, actually, Monday the 28th, and he will be remembered, I'm sure, by all his colleagues and friends. And I think you've sent condolences on behalf of the team, haven't you? So thank you for that. I just wanted to offer a chance for anyone who wanted to say anything at this point about Roy. Okay, I think he worked on the Thrive team, didn't he?
Absolutely. He was our Thrive at Work engagement officer, and he joined us last year during the pandemic. So we only met in person 3 times, I believe. But very lovely guy, very personable, and certainly a big loss to the team and to his family, of course. So thank you.
And it would have been a very difficult time to have that sort of illness through COVID as well.
Absolutely, and I think it was a very short period as well in terms of diagnosis and then his passing. So a few weeks, if any, actually. So
I'm really sorry to hear that, but it's devastating for his family. So yeah, and our thoughts will be with them at this difficult time. And then I think if we can move on, you know, really it feels wrong to congratulate after such sad news, but we have to face life, and we have lost our vice chairman, Paulette, for all of the very exciting reasons that she has won the by-election that was held last week in Erdington and is now an MP for Birmingham for the seat of Erdington. I think, you know, she's forging a new furrow as the first black MP, which is very exciting, and it seems quite incredible that that has not been the case before now, you know, with a population of Birmingham. But we're very excited for her. Thank you, Sean, and we wish her well. I think I would like particularly to also reflect on the work she has done on this board, in particular around mental health, which has been a passion and an interest that she's taken on our behalf, and I think it would be right for us to reflect in our minutes that we will be sad to lose Paulette. She's been a great contributor to us, and we would like to congratulate her on her achievement and wish her well on representing Erdington in the future. I'm just seeing, yeah, so Lynn, thank you. And I'm just seeing if there's anyone who wants to come in on the back of that. Yeah, excellent. Lots of hand clapping. Thank you. I'm going to slightly move the agenda as well. So we're going to bring the Health of the Region report and programme first, and then the Levelling Up paper will be last, and that's to reflect the presenters who are going to be joining us at different points in the meeting. So hopefully that will all just land in place and everyone will be here at the right time so that we get the best out of the meeting. So I hope that that works for all of you. And I'd just like, as by way of a last discussion point, I'd like to just reflect that as we've now moved into a more normal state of affairs, if ever we can call normal, I'm wondering what the view is around having in-person meetings so that we start to build up more relationships and we start to build the partnerships that I think are going to benefit us as a board in the future. There is a huge convenience, I know, to many people around this type of meeting. I think we won't lose it entirely, but I would very much like to think that we will have the chance to meet again in person in the future. And can I just chuck out a thought and say, how about the next meeting being in person? You know, spring is coming. It would be a good time to meet. Hopefully we'll have more sunshine. We've got sunshine here in Warwick today. But perhaps I could, you know, ask for your thoughts on this. And Karen, you're going to come together on it.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair, and morning, everyone. I just wanted to say, obviously at the CA, we've got the facility for having people in person and virtually. So I'm assuming that that would continue because obviously it's quite convenient for those of us who are going to back-to-back meetings, and logistics sometimes you just can't do both, and you're having to decline meetings if you're then having to travel. So I would just hope that we can have that facility. I know, because it's a problem with the LEP, for instance, they have other meetings elsewhere and you just can't, they don't have a remote facility. So as long as we can have that, that would be great.
Mubashir, do you want to let us know how it's set up?
Yeah, so Chair, I think we have the facility, as Councillor Grinsell said, we can make a hybrid meeting, but I think we'll have to then limit the number of people in that room, and I can get the number right, but I think it's around 15.
Yeah.
So if in person we have about 15, the rest can be a hybrid, you know, joining virtually, then that should be okay.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that sounds like some. So I've got Mike and I've got Cameron. How nice to have both of you. Lovely. Thank you, Mike.
Good morning, Chair. Lovely to be here. I absolutely agree with you. For new faces like myself, it's really important to have that contact time. Yeah. I think there are two caveats to that. One is we just need to acknowledge the ridiculously extortionate and increasing prices on fuel, which is going to affect travel. True. And secondly, our commitments to sustainability and the green agenda. So I think I'd offer a mixed model as an option, but you know, those two caveats I think are important to acknowledge.
Absolutely, that is a good point. Yep, and certainly at the moment it's looking well, Europe's looking very uncertain, and I think we should just reflect on the difficulties there are and how it's going to impact on us. I will say that, yeah, impacting on us feels a lot smaller than what's going on in Ukraine at the moment. But Cameron.
Yeah, hi colleagues. Yeah, I agree with colleagues. I think they've basically said most of the points I wanted to raise. I just think what could be probably helpful is, you know, maybe we could have at least, you know, I don't know, at a particular time we can get together, because I think it's important for us to come together, whether even if it was like after a certain amount of meetings or something where we can sort of come together. I think that'll be very helpful for personal contact and just to keep things moving. But the hybrid model is very sensible because we're all struggling. I'm struggling, you know, time commitments, work commitments, family commitments. If we were paid the same as directors, I'm sure we could stop a few of our other jobs, but
that's
unfortunately
not about to happen anytime soon.
So I think we all have other commitments that we do unfortunately have to you know, exist with.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, all very good points. We haven't got a date for the next Wellbeing Board meeting, but actually reflecting those points, I think it would be really helpful to consider whether we can aim to be in person, or at least have, you know, a number, and perhaps we could say now, Mubashir, if I'm going to intend to be in person, and we'll see if we can get at least a bit of a quorum together, so that you know, those who haven't met face to face have that chance. It would be great. So we'll work on our agenda for the next, or you know, our time frame for the next meeting on that, but use the hybrid facilities as well. That'll test me. So I think that covers all the points that that I wanted to say at this point in time. So we'll just move on then to the health of the region. Oh, sorry, haven't done the minutes actually. So can I take us to the minutes of the last meeting, which are on pages 1 to 6, and ask if we can agree those, first of all. I will take any hands up as dissension. Otherwise, silence is agreement. Thank you. Then we can agree those minutes. And it seems to be the odd way around, but are there any matters arising from that? I don't believe there are that aren't already on the agenda. So Mubashir, I'm going to move us on to the Health of the Region report. We've got Tatum and we've got Mubashir. Mubashir, are you going to start this, or Tatum, are you?
I'll just introduce it, Chair,
Thank
and then
you.
I'll let Tatum take the reins.
Thank you.
So you'll remember we've obviously come to the board before talking about our plans for this brief update on the Health of the Region report from November 2020. We agreed a cycle of 3 years for every new report, but we felt that there was a time to pause and reflect in the midway point that we were at, and look at I'll look back at some of the commitments and some of the kind of successes in the region, especially from teams like Justin's and the other directors of public health, and the resilience the wider sector has shown in response to the challenges that were raised, and of course the overall challenge of the pandemic itself, and then to also introduce our Health of the Region data hub, which essentially tries to bring to life some of the data that was presented in the report, and then we look forward to planning for the next report. So just setting the scene a little bit, and I'll let Tatum take us through the paper.
Thank you very much. Tatum, to you.
Thank you. Morning all. Yes, I'm going to take you through the Health of the Region work as a whole. So that's the report which you will have received. I'll give you a little demo of the GIS hub as it currently is, and then we'll cover off some kind of next steps for this work. So just to reiterate what Mubashir has already kind of reminded us, this is an interim report. It's a snapshot of the current context where we're at, where we're all kind of up to against the challenges that were set, the commitments that were made. It is meant to capture a kind of evolving landscape and really kind of celebrate the successes across the system. So it's really not trying to do the same as the Health of the Region report 2020, and we will do another full version. So as Mubashir has alluded to, we'll move into a 3-year cycle for the full report. So our next one will be due in November 2023, and this is a kind of 18-month stock taker, kind of stopgap and interim report, and we'll move into that cycle going forward. I do also want to underline the fact that this is a draft. It needs a good tidy. We'll make sure the figures and the references are fully up to date before it's fully finalised. And there, as I've alluded to in the paper, there are kind of front materials that are due to be added, so forward summaries and etc. But most significantly, I think, are your comments today. So we'll welcome comments, amendments, revisions and the like today, please. So just to kind of briefly go over the report, I won't spend too long, but just to say we've essentially we start with a snapshot that kind of brings us right up to date. The last report was released just ahead of the vaccine rollout, so we cover off the kind of vaccine rollout, and as Mike Wade has already alluded to today, the kind of the cost of living crisis that we're facing across the system is covered briefly in that section, that kind of snapshot section. We then move on to our partners across the system and really kind of try to bring to life the excellent work that's going on across the system at the front line, as it were, of delivery, and trying to kind of understand those kind of really kind of community-centred approaches that are happening on the ground, as it were. We then move into a chapter around the local authorities and the work that the directors of public health are leading. We really try to kind of platform that in the centre, that excellent work there. And then there's a kind of final section on those three about that brings to life the work of across the combined authority, and that's really aligned to the renewed focus that we're taking around our devolved responsibilities and how we cut the health agenda across the devolved responsibilities. Then we introduced the GIS data hub, and that really is trying to kind of set the scene for what we may cover in the next report. So what we really want to kind of try to move into is to capture the multiple kind of data sets and show how issues kind of correlate. So we try to demonstrate and capture the cumulative impact of inequalities. Again, all of these plans for what happens next will be determined in collaboration with yourselves, with system partners. And after this brief demo of the GIS hub, I'll go into a few more details on the next steps. Let me share my screen. Thank you. Can you see a map?
We can see a map, but not
Excellent.
terribly well, I will say. Quite tricky.
Okay. Well, if I can you see my cursor hovering?
Yep.
In the middle. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll show you what we're trying to do with this hub. So you can basically come in here, select layers. And here you'll be able to kind of see a few more of it will kind of colour it in, so you should see a bit more definition here. Yeah. But for example, we can have a population summary. Oh. We can zoom in on different areas.
Oh, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can kind of go at different levels. We can use different indicators these are the indicators that were in the Health of the Region report 2020. So essentially this is about producing an online version of the 2020 report, and we will be layering up different kind of data sets so that it's kind of visual and we capture more than is currently available, but as a kind of a line to our renewed focus on the wider determinants of health here. But the direction of travel, what we do with this next is, as I said, very much something for us to discuss and work on together. I'm just reading some comments, sorry. Okay, so as I said, it's a minimal viable product. I will share the link with you today. I would request that you don't share that any wider, but we would like to kind of have you play with that, see what you think, and then we'll kind of go round a kind of engagement process and collect your feedback and see how you felt about the usability of that, and also where you think it's the direction of travel is best placed for us to go. I'll stop sharing my screen now, if that's okay. So in terms of next steps, are you back with me? Can you see me now?
Yep. Yeah.
Great. Next steps. So as I said, we'll take comments today. If people want to follow up, we're happy to take comments until maybe the 18th of March. What we do next will depend on the kind of level of comments that we get back. But if it's broadly acceptable, we'll work in those revisions, circulate a final, and then we'll work with our comms and design team to turn this into a glossy, which we will also send you. And then we're aiming to launch the report with the next planned Health of the Region Roundtable, which is currently penciled in for the 26th of April. And then we'll have an online space where we'll keep this report and the GIS hub. And then immediately after we've done that, we'll work to think about how we then move into the 2023 report. And you know, depending on priorities nearer the time, hopefully I can bring that back to next board, and we can hopefully discuss how we want to do that in terms of whether we want to kind of invite board members into an advisory group or a working group to kind of shape the content and the approach.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Tatum. That's great starter, and as expected, brilliantly triggered a few questions, and Justin's first, followed by Karen's. So Justin, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the concern for me is this is replicating what's being done by lots of local authorities in terms of a digital dashboard version of the JSNA. And one of the things that is really important about the JSNA is not just data visualization. It has narrative that goes alongside it that explains the differences. And I would be really concerned at this kind of dashboard moving forward without proper engagement with Directors of Public Health, but also without consideration about how it lands. I think as an internal tool for the board, it may be very helpful. But I think as something that's external, it has real risks because we all know how data can be picked up and misrepresented. I think the other thing is the ICSs are working with us at place level on a similar, so we're trying to get one dashboard in each place, which updates in the same time, in the same way, so you don't end up with journalists going, this dashboard says this and this one says that, and therefore you're not competent. So I think there's quite a lot of discussions that we need to have between the team and the Directors of Public Health around this. And I'm conscious that the report itself came to you in its totality at the same time it came to the DPHs. So we weren't able to comment on a draft before it's come to the board. And I think we need to work through that chronology of engagement so we can support you as members better in responding to this and helping to shape it for the future.
Really important point, and in many ways, since the sort of inception of this, ICSs have come along, and that data collection and sharing is really important. And actually, Justin, for me, the point that, you know, in local authorities, we are data rich. We really are data rich. It's how we share the data across health, which in many ways is the hope around ICSs. And then, you know, trying to draw that together has some real value. But I agree with you, because it's nothing without a story behind it. So I kind of do understand that. Tatum, do you want to respond to those points, and then I'll ask Karen.
Thank you, Justin. Yes, I fully take on board your points, and yes, we are conscious of the other things that are out there, and this is why we want to go through a process of engaging. You know, we were really just putting together a minimal viable product to then do that engagement and see what the value added is, specifically where and how. We have, I should say, already done some engagement in terms of, you know, going across the system. One of our public health registrars that was with us did do a lot of that work, and it did feel very much that the response that we had back was, yeah, great, make a start on this, please, and then we can work on how we then shape it, taking it forward. And yes, I very much take your point on, as an internal tool, it will be very useful for us. So across the CA, you know, the kind of the different work streams that we have, understanding the health implications of all of those is definitely a primary use for us. So selfishly, yeah, we did want to put something together for that primarily, and we will go through a thorough engagement process to find out what then is, you know, useful or not later down the line. And I fully accept your point around the chronology of the engagement. Yes, we I take responsibility for that. We didn't quite have the time to put this together in advance. It's turned out to be significantly bigger than we expected as a kind of snapshot, and you know, I will reiterate that we will do a much kind of fuller engagement process for the full report November 2023, and we'll start that much earlier, so we've got that kind of baked in much earlier on. But thank you for those points.
Tatum, there's a lot going on in chat, which is really quite important as well. Sorry, Mubashir, were you going to pick up that?
I was just going to pick up on all of these comments. Obviously, they're very, very helpful. And just to say that, yeah, absolutely. I think the best audience for this is internal use at the CA, and we look at all the tools as well at the same time. I will also say that this is almost setting the scene for what we're trying to do at the CA in terms of wanting to be more evidence-based and trying to layer on top all of the different devolved powers and the data that comes from those in a single space to allow a bit more influence on some of those other areas in terms of understanding what their work has an impact on health outcomes. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, really. So it's not just to visualize the health of the region report it is in the basic sense, but really what we're trying to do is make this a launch pad for, you know, what we were calling the fairer, greener, healthier kind of data hub, in a sense, so that people can start seeing the interactions between the various indicators and different areas of work. So absolutely, you know, it needs to go to the DCH formally. We're working with OHID. You know, we have the LCIS fully involved in this. So, and again, the idea is to have this as one of the many resources, but certainly not sit in isolation in any way.
Yeah, thank you. Karen.
Yeah, thanks. I'm probably just going to reiterate what's already been said, because when I read this and I read the Solihull section, I thought, is that all we're putting in, when I consider the 200-300 page document that our public health director has just pulled together for, you know, for our pandemic response. So public health annual report has come out, and it's probably come out in every authority by now. There's a huge amount of information in that, and when I saw the Solihull contribution, I thought, there's no way my director actually wrote that or submitted that, because she has done so much more than this. So I'd really want, so I'm afraid, yeah, before printing this, it should have been run past public health directors to make sure they were happy with it. And obviously we'd have been able to add to the narrative around this. So that's that point. The other point I was just, and it's probably something maybe possibly should be asking Justin directly. When I looked at some of these graphs in here, Justin, because I know, you know, you'll know about the numbers behind these. Should these sorts of graphs, should they go a bit further, because they're quite overarching in the groups, and I know certain ethnic groups have been affected and communities have been affected far more by the pandemic. Is there something we should be doing in terms of going a bit deeper? I mean, I don't know, that's just a question, possibly for Justin and others, obviously, who actually brought this report together.
Can I, Justin, I'm going to bring you in just on that point, but what I would just say is that this is not here to replicate your own council's work. Absolutely not to do that. And it's perfectly possible for the team to be delving into your own GSNAs and your own public health reports as well, because you know, what we need to do is look at the work of the WMCA and the evidence that helps to support that work. Now, it's not going to be a standalone, because there will be a need to come in and delve into particular councils' evidence. And I would recognise absolutely that we would open our arms out to help with that evidence base. But you have to have a starting point. You have to have a data set within your own teams to help to inform the work that is being done within the WMCA, which is the additionality that we need to bring to bear. So that's how I see this, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but that is for me where we need to be striking. And we came together in the summer of COVID and decided that we, as a panel, as a board, wanted to do the state of the health of the region, and this is how we start to develop that. It's not a total piece in itself, and it's not in any way, shape or form replicating your council's work. So Justin, there was a direct question to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I think, I mean, I absolutely appreciate the points about, in all of our areas, we've got DPH reports that reflect on the last 2 years of the journey through the pandemic. I think there is something around the structuring of the report which might help, and I think bring out exactly what you're saying, Chair, that the report should start with what has uniquely happened at a CA level. And actually, by I think one of the things on reflection, and actually it's only come through as Councillor Grinsell was making those comments, so by trying to give a kind of window of everyone, so it's been like this authority, that authority, we've lost a little bit of the journey of what the report's supposed to reflect. We should be celebrating the fact that the leaders of the combined authorities sat together on a weekly basis, put aside political differences and work together. The chief execs and the DPHs met on a regular basis across our boundaries, the chairs of the health and wellbeing boards, and we have achieved, I mean, Councillor Grinsell will remember, in late April, we called that emergency meeting, the Health and Wellbeing Board, and we joined together with you to talk about ethnicity and COVID. We were barely a month into the pandemic. I think those are the things that we should be highlighting through the report more, and probably taking out some of the, and this happened in Wolverhampton, this happened in Birmingham, because I think otherwise that will trigger people in the way. On the point of the data, I think there probably is some additional work that could be done that looks at some of the more granular inequalities that, if you look across the whole patch, are consistent. It is in there at the beginning in some of those graphs, but I don't think it's brought out as much as the, so what do we do next? And that would be my final point, is that this report, as I see it as a DPH, is how you as a board and leads of chairs are saying to us, these are the areas we want you to collaborate on. And there's a very, very strong message from the experience of COVID around our work with ethnic communities across the region. And in many areas, those communities are too small within a local authority to pick out this particular Nigerian community or this particular Nepali community. And I think that's where the value could be brought from this report, to say, if you step back and you look across the patch of the CA, there are some areas where we've worked together in the past. Gypsies and travellers is another good example. if we continue this collaboration, we are greater than the sum of our parts, and that is the reason for the CA, if that makes sense.
Justin, I think you have captured it really helpfully. So thank you for that. And I do think those messages need to go back, and I'm sure Mubashir Tatum, you're picking those points up. I'm going to ask Karen to come back, and then Mike, and if we can be reasonably quick. It is important. It is important then. Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't really want to come back. That is absolutely fine, and that's what I was trying to get at, really, because there are, you know, other reports that we've done, and I think it just doesn't reflect that joined up working, as Justin says, that we all came together. You know, when we look back at Nightingale setup, mortuary setup, there was all sorts of things that we had to work together on, and that was right across the patch. So I think that just needs to be reflected a bit more.
Yeah, and it's also forward-looking as well. So
yeah, what's come out of it? What have we learned? You know, and what we take forward. Yeah.
Okay, Mike.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Chair. Thanks, Justin. Because I think following the course that you've outlined, I think you've also got a powerful tool here to help lever where our ICSs and the NHS are thinking, particularly around prevention, which goes beyond that local place-based level. The risk is obviously that ICSs need a single version of the truth to base its planning around, and we just need to manage, again, in the narrative, what this is for and how it could be used in that space, I think. Thanks.
Really useful points, and also there's some very rich points in the chat, which I would hope that we will also capture. Mubashir Tatum, can I invite you to come back, because I think we've got some, we just need to move the dial a bit on this.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, all of these comments are very, very helpful indeed, and you know, which is why I think we presented the draft report in the form that it was. I think one of the risks was that if we waited for all the rounds to go around with everyone in terms of sending the draft to the key stakeholders involved in the region, we would be waiting to publish this report until the next board meeting, which was not going to be until after spring. So I think that the timing sort of played into this as well. But absolutely welcome all of these comments, and this is not going to be published until we have an agreed version, and perhaps we can send around after all of the comments have been addressed, we can send around to the board by email to agree before printing.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, and give everyone a chance to, you know, actually give a deal more scrutiny and, you know, put their points as well. But I think this has been a helpful discussion, and we'll start to, you know, focus our mind more on that. So thank you all for that, and we'll look forward to that online version coming forward. And please contribute in the same way on that. Thank you. Right, so moving on to the next item, which is the Wellbeing Programmes update. So you're going to give us a quick overall view on that, aren't you, Mubashir? Yep.
Yes, thank you, and I'll bring in a couple of colleagues as we go along as well. So I think in the report we've just kind of gone through, as we always do. We present, we go through the high-level deliverables that we've set for ourselves, and we've just gone through every single one of them and given a status update, so to speak. So I think last time at the board we did an in-depth look into Thrive Into Work. And you know, we've on the back of that, we've had meetings with colleagues in Wolverhampton where we're trying to now customize the program a little bit further to make sure it meets the needs of that area. John Denley, the DPH there, has been very, very helpful in getting this kind of custom offer to make sure that the performance numbers in Wolverhampton are better than the average that they've been. So that's ongoing. We also have a potential visit. Actually, that's since been updated since we put this paper together. We were expecting the Minister for Disabled People to make a visit towards the end of this month. However, that's now going to be postponed, given that we were not able to put in enough time in her diary to be able to really showcase the program. And then there were some PERDA rules as well that were kind of playing in. So we're going to, she's very keen to want to visit the region and look at the program. So we're going to try and liaise with them to do that at a later time. We are also hearing great feedback from the Work and Health Unit about extension of the program wider than 2023. So we'll keep the board abreast of all updates on that. For the Thrive at Work program, we're going to have a deep dive into that next. Jed's going to come in and talk to us about that. So I'm going to try and leave a lot of time for that because that will be the one that we want to really a lot of input from the board on. Speaking of Jed, Jed's been leading the Mental Health Commission work as well, and we now have an induction date set up for the 7th of April to get the board, the commission together and get them to start working on it. And you know, it's taken a while. Things have been delayed because of various reasons, but we're now starting the work and quite looking forward to it. So everything seems to be on track there. I do want to bring in Simon Hall here really quickly to give us an update on the work program for physical activity and exemplar region on disabled people. So,
yep, lovely. Excellent. Should we start with, are we going to bring Simon in now? Yep. Okay, lovely, Simon.
Yeah, just bring him in for a little bit and then I'll close up and then we'll bring Jed.
Okay, perfect.
Only for quick points. One, we continue to work with DSMIS and your local authorities and Sport England of how do we move the Commonwealth Active Communities 2-year funding into plans for a long-lasting physical activity legacy in the region, something similar to Glasgow compared to London 2012. That work with Sport England is really important as we move to the end of our existing grant agreement with Sport England, and we are discussing with Sport England of how we work together with the sport and physical activity system in relation to our strategic priorities, which will see us shifting from programme funding. As part of that work, we're exploring what we could do better and different to build on our Include Me West Midlands work of being an exemplar region, improving health outcomes for disabled people. And we appreciate the opportunity to bring a report to colleagues shortly. And Chair, I must continue to thank the Directors of Public Health, ICS leads and partners for their continued support and commitment to our bid to become one of DfT's social prescribing walking and cycling pilots. We are motoring. We have to submit a feasibility study by 30th of April, but the passion, respect and commitment from colleagues across the region towards a single bid will help us get over the line. So I much appreciate people's input.
Yeah, and that's in the paper. The feasibility study needs to be submitted by the 30th of April. So May's going to be the deadline. May's hopefully the announcement time. Yeah, great. So thank you for that. Mubashir, back to you. Justin, on that one.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to mention in relation to the Commonwealth Games, work on the legacy strand around physical activity continues, and I think there is some quite useful learning to be shared, which might be worth also when Simon comes back to this group for a more substantive item picking up. Particularly pleased about the commitment we have across Birmingham Solihull, which I hope others will start to follow, of a commitment to train 1,000 healthcare professionals to give very brief advice on physical activity over the Commonwealth Games year, and the work that the ICS are leading on integration of physical activity into clinical care pathways. So I think there's some really exciting opportunities for the wider footprint of the region to take what's been started as part of the Commonwealth Games and build on that legacy moving forward. So I'd welcome that at the future meeting to share some of that in a bit more detail.
be great. And also, you know, afterwards to capture the essence and the findings and you know, the benefits, which we hope will be, you know, something that we can share wider. Thank you. And Lisa.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to agree with the points made by various people about sharing learning and also sharing successes. My DPH colleagues know I'm a good one for showing off, and so in Sandwell, especially on children's physical activity, and I think in no small part due to the Sandwell Aquatic Centre and the buzz that has created, we've seen another significant rise in children's physical activity, and we're now the 4th highest in the country, which for a deprived area like Sandwell is a bit of an achievement. And we've just invested a whole lot of new funding into free swimming, really focused not on swimming, but everything that goes around it, the sport and activity and community cohesion, things that go around it. And I know, you know, as I think across Birmingham and Solihull and all my other colleagues, there's instances of success like that, which I think is a good time to get them out, polish them off and wave them in the air a bit. Because I think what will really excite our local population as we come to the Commonwealth Games is the idea that we're building on a strong base. We've actually already got real amazing programs and improvements in place. You know, the whole success breeds success thing.
Definitely. Definitely. So important, Lisa, and thank you. Thank you for that. Cameron, our champion. Cameron, if you're muted, I think.
Yeah, sorry. I think I want to thank Simon. I want to agree with many of the points he's made. I just think it'd be important if we could have a future agenda item about being an exemplar region for disabled people's ambitions, because I think that's so important. And I know, you know, from my long-term working with Simon, I've noticed that we've really managed to highlight and tackle many of the grievances that many difficult communities were facing. But I think on the back of COVID, with the inequalities agenda, I think it all does tie together. So I think if we could have some attention with a future agenda item that we can really celebrate, but at the same time learn what, you know, from our past issues and dealings, how we could improve things for the future.
That would be, I'd welcome that. I think that would be really, you know, appropriate and great, and actually builds on Lisa's point, which, you know, hopefully is actually celebrating achievements. So at the right time, Simon, perhaps we can do that, please. Lisa?
Sorry, I just to throw in, I totally agree with that point about disability sport, disability physical activity. We do have a contact if anyone in WMCA wants to utilise it. We know quite well the lady who won the first gold medal in Paralympic rowing back in Sydney. Her name's Helene Dyson, and she often does things for us. So if you need a contact, if we're going to do anything again a bit showy, I'm really advocating for attention to disability access and opportunities. Definitely. There's a contact there.
Simon, I'm sure you'll be able to pick that up. Thank you. So that's a plan for the future. I'm going to keep us back on track, and I think we've got Jed now. Did you want to come in first, Mubashir?
No, I mean, I was just going to say that one of the last updates was around the Radical Harm Prevention Fund, and I shudder to think what the board thinks of me mentioning that without actually moving forward. But again, I've seen some positives from the SPADs on this from DHSC, and so we are resubmitting a version of the Radical Harm Prevention Fund for budget this month. And so we'll keep the board updated on what happens with that. I'd also like to say that there's elements of the Radical Harm Prevention Fund around digital innovation and helping support startup grassroots work on prevention. using digital tools through the Smart City Region proposal, that the opportunity that we have from the Levelling Up paper, which is something that we're going to go into in the Levelling Up discussion next. But I just thought I'd let the board know that that is something that is back on again, and you know, we're hearing some positive vibes.
Good news. Good news. Jed, would you like to come in on the item on Thrive at Work?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The report covers programme context, current performance, funding, and also the opportunity to refresh the programme. So that's the ground that I'm going to cover. Just jumping to the end first, in terms of the ask of the board, we're really keen for some initial reflection from board members about the potential opportunity to refresh the Thrive at Work programme, and also we're really keen for board members to identify colleagues that we can have follow-up conversations with about refreshing the programme. So that's kind of what the ask is. In relation to the programme, I'm not going to do too much of the context, but it's been running since 2018. Initially set up as a research trial, and it was to respond to the work and health agenda, specifically enabling employers to promote and support the health and wellbeing of their employees. At the moment, it's currently fully funded by central government via Midlands Engine and MHPP. That funding comes to an end at the end of June. There was a bid that's been put in via MHPP to central government to extend the programme, potentially MHPP in the round, potentially till March 2024. The outcome of that decision from central government is still awaited. In the meantime, there's been something called a no-cost extension that's been agreed, which means the programme can run with additional underspend up until September of this year. So that's the current funding position. In relation to the model, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but essentially there's five core elements of it: enablers, mental health, MSK, healthy lifestyles, and risk to health. So that's kind of what the components of the model are. There's four different levels of accreditation: foundation, bronze, silver, and gold. And in relation to kind of the performance, current performance, there's at the moment 500 organisations signed up to the programme. There's currently 34 organisations that have reached accreditation at foundation level and 35 at bronze level. And predominantly the programme targets organisations with more than 8 employees. There's a mix of public sector, charitable sector and private sector organisations on the programme. There's a case study set out in 3.3 by Steps to Work, who were one of the early organisations to join the programme. And essentially, when you boil it down, good elements in relation to what Steps to Work did were they had good, strong leadership that advocated for mental health and wellbeing in the workplace. They had good championing via the HR manager, which was key. They changed systems and processes, including introducing wellbeing meetings. So you could get a feel for kind of the benefits of the programme, how we worked with them and how that benefited them, but also the importance of their internal capacity and leadership to help take mental health and wellbeing in the round seriously. We've reached a point now where there's an opportunity for us to press the reset button, basically. With the impact of COVID, which has disrupted delivery of MHPP and Thrive at Work specifically over the last 15 months, there's an opportunity for us to kind of pause and reflect. There's been a lot of good work that the programme has delivered. It wasn't originally set up to provide quite a lot of the quantifiable data, sickness, absence, etc. But there's a lot of good evidence in relation to the infrastructure that's been put in place as a result of engagement with the programme. But ultimately, the world's changed since 2018, and there's an opportunity, and with the funding changes as well, there's an opportunity for us to pause and reflect and think about kind of what the future holds in relation to the programme. There's new market entrants that provide products that weren't there previously. There's a greater focus on mental health and wellbeing and health in the round in terms of the employer focus. And we've got to reflect on the product's ability to meet current needs. So that's why we're coming back to the question, which is we would value your reflections in terms of thoughts about refreshing the programme in light of current circumstances. And we're really keen for follow-up conversations with people that you identify in relation to what we can do differently and better going forwards in terms of refreshing Thrive at Work. So that's it in a nutshell.
Great, thank you very much, Jed. I'm going to ask Justin to come in because he's popped a very relevant question in, and then Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. So I should declare I sit on the Council of Health and Work, which is the national body that represents all of the professional groups working in health and work as a special advisor. And I also sit on their subgroup on mental health and work, which has been really interesting over the last year. So I've got a bit of a biased view of this. I think it's worth looking at, if we look at the totality of the business numbers, we're still struggling to scratch the surface. You know, that even in Birmingham, 98,000 businesses, and although the vast majority of those are SME, you know, there will be thousands that are above 80 staff. And so 500 across the footprint in the CA is still very, very low engagement. And I think as part of this journey, we need to have conversations with businesses through the chambers about why is this not resonating? Why are they not engaging? Do they not value the accreditation, which is quite possible because, as you say, the market is now much more crowded. The hurdles are too high? Is it the support is inadequate for what they get back? You know, I think that's one of the key bits of learning that needs to be brought to the group to discuss the future, is that real insight with businesses. I think the other thing that's interesting, which is coming through my work with the council, and will be, we host at the NEC, or rather I say Councillor Grinsell hosts at the NEC, the largest national conference on health and work in the country on an annual basis at March. We are hosting, I'm part of the council hosting a session on mental health and work, and I suppose the question is, firstly, where is Thrive at that event, given it's on our patch, really promoting, but also where are we using that event to hear and listen? Because one of the big noises that I get through the council is that businesses want to work in this space but are very confused by the landscape offer, because so many people are saying we've got a mindfulness product or a wellbeing product, and they're confused around the commissioning. And I think that's my final point, is in its future around Thrive, I think thinking around how we enable and support businesses to navigate what is now a really crowded landscape is really important. The final bit is being aware that Every Mind Matters will do a national reboot linked to the Commonwealth Games. Now that will be tied to sport and physical activity and mental health, but it provides a beautiful opportunity for the programme to join up Simon's work and Jed's work to go physical activity, workplace, physical activity, mental health, workplace, bring those two together. So I think there's lots of opportunities, but I think the business voice is the bit we really need to hear from, about why doesn't, for the ones that aren't joining, why isn't it working for them?
Really helpful. And can I just, on the back of those very good points, I mean, we collect data on the number of entrants and where they're going up the ladder, etc., etc. And you know, there is a point about what it costs and all of that. But I wonder if actually we're collecting the right data to be more attractive to business. So, I mean, are we giving data on what benefit this might be for productivity, what benefit it might be for sickness days lost? And actually, as we look at it now, there's a change about the patterns of working with more home working where appropriate, and how are we collecting that information that's going to be significantly beneficial to business, because it's one thing about being beneficial to the individual in the workplace. Actually, if you're going to attract business, as Justin says, what's in it for them?
Yeah, no, all really, really, really helpful points. Yeah. And I hope you can see from the way in which we've put the report together that we are really keen to listen and learn and refresh the programme to meet needs. So that's the fundamental approach we're trying to take. I think in terms of kind of Justin's last question, in terms of where's Thrive in relation to the March conference, I mean, we've seen the March conference being put on, and our intention is to have representation there. And again, as you point out, it is about listening and understanding the market and thinking about what we can do in relation to the product, the Thrive product. I think one of the things, and it's very early days, still quite early days, one of the things is there's a question about kind of how we make the Thrive product easy to use and meaningful and demonstrate the right impact. And I think you're right in terms of asking the question about, are we measuring the right things? I think one of the things we've learned is we've measured some things that are helpful, but actually there are gaps in terms of what we've measured, and there is a refresh in terms of what needs to be measured to really understand kind of what difference we're making to businesses and make it more attractive to businesses by saying, well, if you adopt this and program, this is a difference it can make to you in terms of sickness, in terms of kind of productivity, etc. So that's definitely part of what we want to do. I think there's also a question about kind of whatever role Thrive plays in the future, what are the other products in the market that it can be aligned to? Because I think there is something about meeting, you know, how we meet a variety of needs, and Thrive doesn't need to meet all needs. There is something about how we align with other things. So that's another thing we're thinking about. And the voice of business, absolutely, we want to hear very clearly in terms of what's important and what works for businesses and any other stakeholders you think are critical.
Cameron, you wanted to come in.
Hi, colleagues. Yeah, thank you, Chair. You've kindly probably mentioned some of my key points, but on the back of overall, I think, you know, besides this case study, you know, and I think you mentioned indirectly lockdown and the different way of working. How is, you know, what is this work really directly probably teaching us about workplace well-being? And what I think most importantly, what actually works? And probably Jed's opinion would be vital and important on that.
Jed.
First, I think my opinion, I'm not an expert in the field, so I've got an opinion, but I wouldn't hold. I don't think it carries that much weight. I think Justin sitting on national boards and that probably will have a little bit more of a better understanding. But the fundamental thing for us is the last 18 months or whatever in terms of lockdown, obviously workplaces have transformed in terms of how they work and the implications there's been for people's physical and mental well-being. And I think that's one of the things we need to really understand. So we are doing a piece of work to try and get underneath what that really means and how we respond to that need going forward. So that is something that's vital, I think.
Cameron, you want to come back? Yeah. Oh, you're on mute. Cameron, you're, I think, muted. Yeah. We can't hear you. I don't know.
Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It
Good.
looks like I have to press 3 buttons to get mute off. So just briefly, I just wanted to probably mention also, we have to be mindful of the inequalities as well. You know, some people working at home in different roles and in different parts of organizations, it's good for them. You know, they've got very, very comfortable living. But then we also have to recognize people who may not have as comfortable living, who may be in a difficult situation, housing situation, and how that has affected their mind, because they still have to be at home and maybe the workplace is probably better for them. I think we just got to be mindful of that, and that was probably one of the points I wanted to just slightly tease out, that I think different people have faced different challenges as you're higher up the executive ladder, especially in a lot of the workforces. Let's be honest, you know, most things are very, very nice. You've got an extra few hours, you know, that you can, you know, you have off because you ain't traveling. But we have to recognize, unfortunately, that other people, especially with young children, people with deprivation, how they have to face the consequences of being in a different work environment. And I think we need to continue to have some attention to that, because I think that's going to contribute, unfortunately, to our future challenges now.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Councillor. And the thing about kind of understanding and responding to mental health and wellbeing in the workplace is about understanding all the different influences. And you're absolutely right. So it's kind of the housing, sports, physical activity, opportunities, etc. So there is something about the wider determinants and understanding that and thinking about how in the workplace those issues can be meaningfully responded to. So yeah, absolutely right. And obviously the CA is in a good place for that, because part of our levers or our focus is about thinking, in part at least, in terms of those wider determinants. So this isn't just about home working if you're lucky enough because you've got an office job or you're high in the hierarchy. It's about thinking about workplace wellbeing, all the different things that influence it, and thinking about how supporting employers support meaningful strategies in place that support their workforce, that respond to those different issues.
Thank you, Jed. Mubashir, and then I think we can probably come to the next item after this.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm actually keen to hear from our old colleague and current person in MHPP, Sean, and his thought on the wider work around this. And I noticed he had raised his hand, but then
he
put
did.
it down.
We'd
really love to hear from, provide a little bit of wider context in terms of what MHPP is trying to do in this space, and how we can actually develop the program of Thrive at Work in the future, how that influences it. So sorry to put you on the spot, mate, but is it okay if you come in?
I've never caught him short of a word to say. So
well, I was trying to be very good, Chair, and not jump in when I shouldn't jump in. I know I'm no longer Chair.
I know you of old.
I mean, I have to say Justin's comments are absolutely spot on, and that's exactly where I think we need to be. MHPP is going through a transitional phase 2 at the moment, where we're trying to understand where we are across the marketplace and develop a really clear structure. And the bits for me that are really trying to think about now, if you look at the NICE guidance that was published earlier this week, it was really about trying to think about how can workplaces be used to support the reduction in challenges for the NHS and the broader health system. So it's all about promotion and prevention, which I think is going to be really supportive of where our angle is going to go forward. I think the other bit for me that's really important is about, I think Justin made a really good point. We've spoken to quite a lot of businesses now, and let's take the product of Thrive out for a second. But businesses are saying, you type into Google Wellbeing offer, and there are 24 million things that pop up. So it's really hard for people to understand that. So I think the thing that we should be doing now collectively for the Midlands is thinking about how do we enable businesses to have a quick needs assessment about understanding what they need, a very quick answer, and then actually we help to signpost them to the areas of interest which would support the things that are their issues. So instead of at the moment them going out and thinking, well, I've heard mental health first aid, or I've heard of a wellbeing service, or I've heard of a golf membership would be helpful for people to get them out walking. All of those things are really lovely, but actually it's not focused, and it's moved away from a business focused agenda that businesses normally work to. So I think we go back a step and say, okay, design what the need is, ask them what the questions are, and therefore we do that. Now, we're going to be doing that in the region, and I also think we're going to be trying to see whether we can pilot something with Coventry and Warwickshire LEP to think about a marketplace offer to helpfully bring together the marketplace in a way, a bit like a trusted trader type approach, where you can then get people to say, well, we've worked with those individuals. They work really well for an organisation that's between 10 and 30 people, or 80 and 100 people in manufacturing or in food production or whatever. So you've got some trusted sources of resource going forward. And ultimately, MHPP, wherefore, will be the bit of the glue in the system for the Midlands region, which helps employers choose the things that really matter to them at the time that matters, rather than at the moment we try to do everything for everybody, and actually we probably don't do it as well as we could do.
And you have to, I mean, is this a product that we're wanting to launch in a better way? Where's the marketing, and that element of it? Does it stick along being, actually this is a good to do thing, or is it actually something, because all those products that you're going to Google will be marketed? Where do we sit in that? I'm not asking for answers, but actually maybe 4 years on from the inception, maybe it's a reflection time.
That's exactly what we're trying to do, Chair. Yeah. So it is exactly that. Pause and reflect, understand the market, understand the opportunity for us to have a clear product that meets a specific need and a unique selling point in terms of the marketing aspect of it. So that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Perfect. What a rich discussion we have had, and I have allowed it to go on because it was going so well. Thank you. Really useful. Jed, you've got a lot there to take back, I think, as well, and hopefully that will be quite useful in thinking it the next stage of this event.
It's really helpful. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. So I'm going to take us back to the future, to use another expression, so if I may. And I think we've moved to the Levelling Up paper. And is Stacey with us? I think she is, actually. I'm sure I saw her arrive. Yep, Stacey's there. Hi, Stacey. Mubashir, you're going to do a little intro, and then Stacey, I think, is going to take it on for us.
Yeah, so we are obviously all aware the paper came out in early February, and there's lots of implications for the CA, especially around health and well-being. And so we wanted to try and bring this paper into board and present a little bit of a summary of the paper, just in case somebody was not cited on it, and then discuss a few of the opportunities that are available and the work that's being done at the CA since then. We're fortunate to have Ed join us for the latter part of the discussion as well, as he's leading the CA response on the Levelling Up paper. So Stacey's going to take us through the summary, and then we'll go into a discussion.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. As Mubashir said, we'll just start with an overview of the Levelling Up paper, and then talk about the West Midlands Combined Authority opportunities, particularly devolution, Trailblazer, and then opportunities specifically linked to this board around health and wellbeing, which will hopefully be of interest to you all, and you can all start to join in the conversation, which we can take forward from there. So the Levelling Up white paper was initially discussed or Levelling Up as a concept was initially discussed pre-COVID pandemic. It was part during September 21, the Department for Levelling Up formed, and then it launched on the 2nd of February, where we all saw the Levelling Up white paper was formally launched. The paper itself is intended to tackle stark geographical inequalities across the United Kingdom. Within the paper, it has 6 capitals that will drive levelling up. They include physical, human, intangible, financial, social, and institutional capital. You'll notice there's lots of 5s of this, 6s of this, 12s of this as we go through the paper. They're all laid out in the paper if you want to refer to them for further information. Following that, the white paper introduces 5 mutually reinforcing pillars that are designed to mitigate against issues identified in the policy. So they are a mission-orientated approach to policy setting, reorientation of central government decision-making, greater empowerment of local government, and revolution in data evaluation and transparency at subnational level. And lastly, enhanced transparency and accountability. I'm sure all of those chime with everybody, and you can see the relevance and how they really can add value to the levelling up agenda across the country. Once underneath that, there are 12 missions, and within the 12 missions, they're aligned to 4 objectives. So in the paper, if you have it to hand, there is a table that runs through these. So the first objective is boost productivity, pay, jobs and living standards by growing the private sector, especially in those places where they're lagging. This includes missions around living standards, research and development, transport infrastructure and digital connectivity. The second of those objectives looks at spreading opportunities and improve public services, especially in those places where they're the weakest. So this includes education, skills, health, which was of specific interest, and the mission I'm sure we've all heard in the news is around by 2030 the gap in healthy life expectancy to be narrowed between the highest and lowest areas, and that healthy life expectancy will raise by 5 years, which is ambitious. Within this objective as well, there is wellbeing. So the wellbeing will have improved in every area of the UK, with the gap being top performing and other areas closing between even. The third objective is restore a sense of community, local pride and belonging, especially in those places where they've been lost. So this includes pride in place, housing and crime. And the fourth one, empower local leaders and communities, especially those in places lacking local agency. So this is around local leadership. So that's an overview of the white paper and the content within it. Moving on to kind of opportunity for the West Midlands Combined Authority. I'm sure most of you will have heard already that West Midlands Combined Authority has been aligned as a trailblazer, identified as a trailblazer for devolution alongside Greater Manchester Combined Authority. The idea being that items that are trailblazed will be put into blueprint for other combined authorities to follow in the future around devolution. So just moving down the paper, my computer's frozen, which is not overly helpful at the moment, but I'm scrolling. There's two key things that are of relevance, particularly to this board and to the health and wellbeing agenda. So looking at the smart city region, and then looking at the opportunity to look at health. Sorry, give me 1 minute.
Did you want me to come in, Stacey?
It's all right. I'm unfrozen. I'm just not anywhere near the right place.
Yeah.
So going back to sorry. Yeah, I'm back now. So looking at the second part, so looking at the duties to improve the health of citizens in our combined authority region. So we know that levelling up white paper brings significant opportunity for public health across the West Midlands Combined Authority region, and it includes missions both directly and indirectly related to the improvement of the health of the region, which is really positive to us all. And I think there's lots that we can capitalise on through all of those missions. I'm sure when they were being read out, or when you've read the paper, lots of them will chime with things that we know will improve health and wellbeing, much like the High-Up paper that I presented at the last board meeting. It's those cross-cutting agendas across the wider determinants that are fleshed out through this paper. And I think it's really positive to see the commitments to improve healthy life expectancy and reduce inequalities in healthy life expectancy. Also to improve the well-being of the population, and hopefully you'll all notice that these chime with the agreed priorities for the Wellbeing Board. So moving on to the specifics, so the last part of the paper really, and what next, and how do we get involved and make a difference? And I think Mubish is going to take that part of the paper forward.
Okay, great.
Well,
thank you,
actually,
Stacey.
I mean, I think, you know, Thank you, and I think I don't need to go through the paper, but what I'm really hoping to do is have Ed come in and talk a little bit about the work that we're doing going forward on the back of the paper, and specifically in terms of the Trailblazer deal and what it might mean for health. We've listed that we're going to be engaging with the system. I think we've invited colleagues to a workshop hosted by the Health Foundation, which will be taking place on the 22nd of March. We're also working on a proposal for the Smart City region, which I mentioned again, has elements of the Radical Health Prevention Fund and the digital innovation to drive prevention that we're going to add into that. There's some coordination work that we're doing around remote diagnostics in the region, which links in with this as well. And this was on the back of the meeting with the ICS chairs. So we're trying to put it all together and pull it into a response, and we'll be working with system partners to make sure it is something which is representative of the region and what we want to do going forward around health next. So Ed, is that
Hi,
key
Ed.
for you?
Good to have you here.
Hello. Yeah, so I don't think there's very much I need to say on top of what Stacey has said, other than so perhaps just three kind of processy things. First of all, we expect the Trailblazer devolution deal to be negotiated first and foremost between now and July, the summer recess in July. And then probably for there to be some more conversations after July on the kind of finances up to an autumn fiscal event. So that's sort of by way of a timeline. And what that then means is that between now and the Combined Authority Board meeting on the 10th of June, we have a window of opportunity to come up with some ideas along the lines that Stacey has identified. So that's the first processy point to make. The second is that in the immediate near term, I think we've got to do two things. One is we've got to understand what on earth the Department for Health and Social Care understands by what's in the white paper when it talks about health duties for mayoral combined authorities to improve the health of their residents. because it is not at this point, I think, clear to any of us precisely what that means, and we need to understand what that means. And secondly, then to be really ambitious in coming up with ideas, and that's what makes this meeting and in the next few weeks really, really important, because I think there is an opportunity to come up with a set of ambitious ideas, and I see it as a kind of diamond process. This, you know, we can come up with lots of ideas through to the end of March, beginning of April, but after that it will be a whittling down to June as to what is actually feasible and what is actually likely to get across the line by way of a deal. But right now we're in this kind of window of what are the ideas, if we can understand what the department is actually saying. Then the third processy point is this. I don't perceive there is any specific appetite on the part of the combined authority itself and the mayor to be taking on new powers and responsibilities around health. I think it is much more the case that we need to see in the region, with the appropriate institutions in the region, them having the appropriate powers in order to tackle these wider health inequalities that we're also concerned about. So this might be a case of where we need to see what I think some people have described as double devolution, and it's actually more important to be clear about what our public health partners, particularly in our local authorities, need from a devolution deal, rather than what the combined authority itself might need, if you see what I mean. So I think that's part of the conversation that we need to have, and indeed our other NHS partners and our ICSs. Do you see what I mean? So I think the combined authority to some extent is, if you like, holding the ring on the conversation, but it's really crucial that it's not something for the combined authority, it's something for our partners to say what is it that they want out of a devolution deal when it comes to health and wellbeing.
Great. Very interesting, very interesting. So Mike, you're going to kick us off.
Thanks, Chair, and I think Ed raises some really healthy points there, and thanks, Stacey, for the presentation. Yeah. I think just a point in that we can't look at the Levelling Up white paper, I don't think, outside of also looking at the integration white paper and also the upcoming disparities white paper.
Yeah,
it's important that we look at the read across between the three. A concern that I have is that we're going to be bombarded with outcomes or lent towards looking at outcomes across the respective white papers that may not all align. So I've fed that up to national government to say that we really do need to help place to think about those outcomes. But I think the debate and the divergence that the opportunity for some divergent creative thinking is when we look at a sensible set of outcomes, we look at the variation across the patch in those outcomes, and we look at the key areas, going back to the point Justin was making earlier, that bring us together as a combined authority to think about where we can make traction against those.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Mike. There was a request, I think, for more detail about the event on the 22nd, I think, 23rd of April. Can you, Mubashir, Ed, I don't know, can you give me a bit more of, you know, is this going to be an opportunity to think outside the box, to come forward with those ideas and to do that, you know, that expansive thinking as a group? Because, you know, actually you do need to sort of throw it all out there and come forward with those innovative ideas to then start to put some shape around what goes in. So if just a little bit of thought around that, and then I'll go to Justin, Cameron and Karen.
I mean, I think it depends what kind of a person you are. When you read the Levelling Up white paper, if you're a glass half full person like me, then you take the government at its word, and the government is saying this is going to be a trailblazing devolution deal, that nothing is off the table, and therefore we can enter into these conversations with real ambition and hope that we might actually secure something different and start to change the system. If you're a glass half full, half empty person, then you can say there's no money, the policies aren't very good, and it's all fluff. Do you see what I mean? And other government departments aren't bought into it. And so you know, I've met people with both of those demeanours, and I respect them both, if you see what I mean. But my sense is that we have got, as I described, this window opportunity for some creative, divergent systems thinking that we could try to put on the table. And if we end up in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks time being disappointed, then, well, we gave it a really good shot, and we might have moved some of the conversation on, even if we haven't actually landed the things that we particularly want. But right now, my view is that we should take the government at its word, and we should find creative ways, for example, at this board meeting, but then there may be other things we want to do in the next few weeks. The Health Foundation Roundtable that Mubashir is talking about, you know, there'll be other things where we start to pull together some creative ideas across all the partners in the sort of health and care sector across the West Midlands.
And I'm a half full person, actually, because quite frankly, you've got to be in it to win it, haven't you? So why wouldn't you? You know, I'd hold their feet to the fire, not ours. So yeah, I'm going with Justin, and then Cameron, and then Karen, please.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose a couple of reflections, because I agree. I think we should aim for the stars and then see where we get to. Yeah. I think, you know, if you look at the two missions that immediately kind of align with the health and wellbeing boards, the wellbeing one and the healthy life expectancy, the question mark is there, from the dashboard work that's been done already, an ability to pull out? So if you look at, we're all, you know, the work I've been doing locally, looking at the scarf charts about what's driving life expectancy gaps within the city, and then comparing those across the CA footprints, because there will be commonalities that then go, actually, across the breadth of the CA, cardiovascular disease is probably the common outcome that contributes most to our life expectancy gaps. And then there are variations on things like infant mortality, where some of us, it will be driving much more, but in others it won't. So we need that kind of mapping piece to have an informed conversation. The second is the wellbeing mission, which is the one that I find fascinating that they put in Levelling Up, because ultimately that is about your life satisfaction, happiness, loneliness, etc. Can we pivot that into the stuff we're doing around community cohesion, trust, and civic literacy and civic ownership, and thinking about that? And that leads me to the final point about, we shouldn't just be restricted in considering those two missions. Yeah, actually, in the housing mission, if we can land as a region a decent housing standard approach across all of us, if we can deal with the exempt accommodation in a more joined up way across all of us, because I think particularly those of us who are more urban are really feeling that exempt accommodation issues. I think they're the places where we should look at all of the missions and go, what's the health impact? What are the things that we would want fundamentally changed, and throw them into the mix? But there's quite a lot of baseline work that needs to look at the evidence base that says actually it's worth doing, or there's no evidence and we need to innovate to close the gap, to be able to get us from where we are now to be able to give you a smorgasbord at the end of March, beginning of April. And I'm just not sure, Mubashir, if the team's got capacity and how we're going to pull that together, because what I'm worried about is we end up with anecdote, and actually to put in a really strong proposal, the more we need to tie it to evidence and tie it to a logic model that's going to work. Yeah,
I've got interdependencies written down here too, which is exactly where you're saying. I mean, housing is, you know, absolutely key. And I guess the other thing and Mubashir, you've probably heard me say this, Ned, before. You know, we, all of us, know who are those frequent flyers, who are, you know, to our services, to health services, possibly to police, and certainly to works and pensions and all of those things. You know, if we want to start lifting the gap, that age gap, you know, there's some targeted work there that could be looked at as well. So this is not for me, it's Cameron and then Karen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I can't work these buttons out. He says something and does something else. No, I think Justin's really laid that out very, very well. I particularly appreciate the way he's tried to break down these key processes, which I think are going to be helpful. But just referring back to, I probably want to concentrate on physical activity and prevention. Now, I remember 4 or 5 years ago when I led a program. It was a great pushback from, my own local civil officer teams for fitness in the parks. Obviously we fought and we got the decisions through, but it was simple decisions that didn't cost a lot of money. Multiple parks got their green spaces marked out. We put permanent paths in certain locations. Now, if you measure them over the probably 4 or 5 years, it's probably gone from probably 4,000 or 5,000 visitors normally to probably 100, 200, 300, 400,000 visitors. So it's been astonishing the growth in the physical paths, especially one of the key ones where we've seen over 1,000% growth. Now, they were simple steps that we took to alleviate and support people's health through physical health. And I think how can we make sure, through the work, the chair does and, myself and physical activity, how can we work with the government? Because I'm, a glass full person, not even half, because what my view is, I think it's very, very much, we want to make sure that we can support the government to try to influence as many of their decisions as possible. I don't bring party politics into health because it's just too sensitive. There's lives on the line every second of the step, or every second thing we say. So some of the things that we've done, it will help support social prescribing. That supported us to get European City of Sport. That also helped us with our UK City of Culture bid. We've had multiple rewards on the back of a £300,000 to £400,000 investment, which sometimes it's embarrassing mentioning these kind of small amounts on the whole overall scale of things. But even then, through the mindset of public health, there was a lot of pushback because it just repeatedly, I was told, no, this doesn't work. The science doesn't say this. But if you look at the science now, it's completely exceeded people's expectations. And also we've added that by adding physical equipment in them key parks, which is now supported the canal basin to have a 5 mile long towpath. And there's been so many rewards off the back of that initial project, which I just want to get this across to some forms of government. We've got to have prevention. When I talked about prevention, 7, 8 years ago, it was like, I was told to, you don't know what you're talking about, because it was just probably ahead of its game. But thank God everybody's on that page now. And I think it's important. How can we, on the back of the legacy of the Commonwealth Games, England, we've got, highest levels of physical inactivity in England, and that hurts, because on the back of Commonwealth goals, can we get some levers to change some of this? Because we've got brilliant data. We've got data for 30, 40 years worth of data now, where we know where the issues are, we know where we need to influence. And being the only Marmot city in the world, working with Sir Michael Marmot, a lot of that deprivation work and inequalities work, we've seen it on the forefront with the support of his team. Clearly there's been no money involved, but at least we've had that knowledge and that behavior change. So I just want to, through you, Chair, and, pleading to some of our key colleagues, how can we get on the table with the government in a positive mindset and try to change some of their thinking when they want to do this new sport and physical activity strategy? We want to do that. We want to work with them.
I think, Ed, did you want to come back on that one? Ed?
Yeah, I'm sure that we all share the kind of impulse that Councillor Khan is referring to. I guess the question in relation to this Trailblazer Devolution deal is, what do we need the government to do differently that it's not doing at the moment that would unlock those green spaces that you talk about, or unlock the physical activity? And I don't think it is just about money. I think it is also about giving us the kind of policy tools that we would need that at the moment inhibit that kind of activity. So it was partly about money, and it's partly about sort of direction of policy. But the critical question for this conversation is, if what you say is right, which I'm sure it is, what is it that government needs to do to enable us to do that better?
And I guess, talking about how do we work across some of the agencies who aren't part of this? So Cameron, you talked about canal footpaths and things like that, and we're going into other agencies, and there's permissions that need to be given and agreements, and smoothing those paths would be incredibly helpful. Actually, I talked about the frequent flyers and people like the Revs and Bens and things like that. You know, we haven't access to those in the same way. So I think there are permissions that, or, you know, if you go in with an approval, you start with an approval and then, you know, have a reason why you shouldn't do something is where I would want to be. Cameron, you wanted to come back on that.
Just check, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, just briefly, just probably, I think that's a very important point. I think one of the things that the government could do is they could, you know, quite clearly with the support of and direction, probably firm direct, they could say, look, every, you know, so much green space requires, you know, some physical activity or some tow paths or some markings, you know, some direction. And I think if we could have that in green spaces, even if it was based on a city or a town, you know, they need a particular, like 20% needs to be marked, 10% needs to be marked. You know, if we did something like that, I think then we'll be, you know, having some direction in a clear manner. And I think only the government can do that, because otherwise it's like, you know, there's so many other things that sort of, you know, bypass this and are felt to be more important, where I think otherwise.
Yeah. Karen, you want to come in?
Yeah, good conversation we're having here. Yeah, so if you want ambition, we want a big health and innovation campus. I'm just putting that on the table. So I mean, obviously at the moment there's a lot of structural changes going on, obviously around the ICS, other, you know, UK health security agencies, or, you know, there's an awful lot of change going on, isn't there? So I suppose from the CA's point of view, I mean, so just going back to the ICS, obviously we're working at a very, very local level, and we want to have those good health impacts at the most local level possible. I suppose with the CA's, from the CA's point of view, though, we need to be looking to see if you've maxed out all the powers that you've currently got. I'm glad to hear that Ed said not taking on any more powers. But, you know, around that active travel, around transport, progressing joint action on air quality, because obviously we know the city's doing one thing, you know, we're all trying to do different things. How do we get that sort of maximum benefit around air quality? And then also maximising the impacts around area-based regeneration in our most deprived areas. So that's a good thing that the CA is doing, is getting that investment into some of our, you know, the brownfield sites and some of the most deprived areas. So when we looked at it, and I looked at the list of strategies and things, or everything that's going on, one of the things that jumped out to us that we could start working on quite quickly was around tobacco control. I mean, because of a lot of the other things, whether it's drug and alcohol, you know, we're doing that at a local level through public health. But one of the things that could be worked on through tobacco control is about having a regional tobacco control network, fund regional focus campaigns, and also a regional digital service. So we could bring everything together that we're all doing, and then have a maximum benefit on it. So there's an idea. It might not be the massive ambitious idea, but it's an idea that we can start working on, and we can all work on that together.
Karen, thank you very much. I see Ed writing. I've got Mike Wade.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks Councillor Grinsaw and Councillor Khan. Really important point. I think part of the problem here lies is that PHE obviously disbanded in October. We've got OHID in place now, and I think we've got to push hard on being clear about OHID's remit at regional level, but because there is a tobacco network. We're talking about having a regional symposium on tobacco control with our DPH. So I think we've just got to find a way of making sure that those communications and OHID's mission are really clear now in the region. And it picks up the point that Councillor Khan was making. Part of my role in OHID is to bridge that place to national government, and making sure that across the different government departments we're having the conversation about health in all policy, but where there is a policy need that's going to impact for local place, that we raise that through OHID. So some work to be done, I think, on just being clear about OHID's role in the system, which I'm picking up on. But I'm here to have those conversations and to do that bridging.
Yeah. Thanks. Cameron, did you want to come in again, or is that a legacy hand? Legacy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to come in on this? There's a little bit going on in chat, which I'm trying to keep up with as well, and I hope you're picking up, team. So I'm going to come back to, I'm not sure who to come back to. Ed, do you want to chip in? And then Stacey and Mubashir, I guess you'd all like to have a little go. Ed.
I mean, I'll just say very simply, thank you for that initial conversation. There is, as I say, a window, I think, about 4 weeks for the big ideas, and then a process of whittling down and developing ideas based on evidence and so on after that, through to June. So Mubashir will be leading that work stream, though there are other work stream leads as well, who will, for example, on housing, that we'll want to feed into because of the interdependencies that people have talked about, and we can channel that. But really, as I say, my encouragement is for people to say, and let's be really specific about this, what is it that government needs to do differently? That's the question. You know, I see in the chat the tobacco control conversation, you know, there may be things that we can do already ourselves, so we don't need government to do. So that's fine, we just crack on with those. But what are the things that we need government to do differently? That's what we've got to focus our minds on for this Devo deal.
Sure. Thank you for that. Justin, you're going to come back in now.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies. I just think point of clarification, Ed, would be really useful.
Yeah.
About where we think central government's thinking is on flexibility around legislation, because I think one of the challenges, we look at Devo deals and instantly everyone goes cash, but actually there are things, particularly in things like planning, where if we had delegated flexibility around primary legislation as part of the Trailblazer piloting, that in things like housing and urban spatial planning would make a huge difference. So I just wanted to get a sense of how much of the Devo deal do you think there is appetite for us to be brave and bold in saying we'd like these primary legislation flexibilities to test how we would deliver differently if as part of that Trailblazer, or is it more kind of project based type stuff?
Those things are absolutely on the table. Legislative change is on the table in the group that has been, the officer group that's been formed in government that we are liaising with on our Devo deal. They have the lawyers involved in order to address precisely those issues. So I would say it's not cash, it's not projects, it is precisely those kind of things that they're looking.
It needs to, Ed, to work across things that are coming out of government, like the planning white paper yet to come, that's going to have a huge influence. If we're going to design, pride of place for the future, environment that's has that sense of well-being built into it, and talking about Cameron's points about creating an environment that puts exercise and green space at the heart of it, then it needs to work across government, not just down through us as a Trailblazer. So there's so much more. It's a Skittles effect, this thing, really. Yeah.
Please bear in mind, we are a relatively small team in the combined authority.
Indeed.
There are lots of people doing policy, doing delivery stuff, but from a policy point of view, I'm talking about across the combined authority. We're a relatively small team. and we're not always as imaginative as some people are around in the wider region. And so, you know, Justin, if you've got specific ideas, then feed them in, because, you know, we need the best brains across the whole region to come forward with ideas at this point in time, not for people just to depend on, you know, the likes of me and a few others in policy working group in the Combined Authority.
And truly, I do think it's the getting together that actually starts to spark those ideas. It really makes a difference. But, you know, today's been enormously helpful, really enormously helpful. Stacey, did you want to come back on any of these thoughts at all? And by the way, can I encourage you all, if you go away and suddenly wake up in the middle of the night with a, you know, spark, please put it on paper and get it through to Stacey, to Mubashir, or to Ed. Stacey.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say thank you all for your input. I think it's really interesting conversations, and I hope we can carry that on from here onwards, just to develop what's really best. And I think from the conversations that I've been listening whilst you've all been typing and talking, and I think there's some things that we do need government to do differently that can really help us, but I do think there's quite a few things that have been mentioned that we can do anyway, and I through this process I don't want to lose sight of the things that we can do anyway. So I think if they're all pulled to us, we can formulate 2 separate lists and work out which sits where, which I think would be really useful. So no, I think it'd be good to take this forward. Thank you.
Yeah. Mubashir, last word with you.
Thank you. I'd just like to reiterate, I think we would really welcome engagement on this. I think, you know, we've reached out to the partners as much as we can, but, you know, we have a tight window to get all of the ideas through. And as you will have seen, as the board has noticed, we've kind of really focused on the current devolved powers that we already have, and wanting to maximize, as Karen mentioned, on what we can achieve through those. And as you saw in this paper, we really highlighted not just the 2 missions that directly on the surface look at health and well-being, but certainly in some of the other missions where the opportunities might be for us to impact on health outcomes. So really welcome all of the input to come through, and we've, as I've stated, we've set up a couple of engagement events that are going to input into this as well. And if we are missing some stakeholders that you think it'd be important to speak to, then again, please highlight those. And I'm happy to receive those by email, happy to catch up one-to-one, whatever works and whatever is helpful. We'll try and manage.
Thank you all. That, you know, it's been a really sparky morning, so I hope we haven't worn you out, and it's a good start. So, right, forward plan. Is there? I've got 2 minutes discussion if we want. Any suggestions for the next meeting? And if you can't think of it now, because you've used a lot of your brain power, we can certainly accept it in writing form. I think we
there was
ought
already
to.
some suggestions when Simon was talking about his update around a paper discussion around the Commonwealth Games and the opportunities there, and the overall opportunities between physical activity and mental health as well, and the disabled citizens exemplar region. So I think we have a few ideas to try and pan out, and hopefully we'll do a deep dive on those in the coming board.
Be welcome, and we may well touch on this subject that we've just had some ideas about, just to recreate those as well. I think would be really helpful. I am actually going to move us on, because Justin has quite rightly invited us to discuss the Ukrainian situation, and he asks whether it's appropriate or not. I have to say I don't really care, because to be frank, I don't think there's one of us who hasn't got this foremost in our thoughts, and the shock, the anxiety that it's creating for all of us, the sense of helplessness, and actually the sense of guilt, because here we are sitting in a safe, warm, lit environment when, you know, people just like us are worried about their lives, their families, and, you know, whether they can give them water and food. And I'm so shocked about it. It's terrible. I know that a lot of our communities are wanting, instinctively to do something and to help. And, they may well be doing all the right things, and they certainly want to do all the right things. The question is whether there's a leadership role for us in whether we can coordinate or across our, certainly that's what I'm trying to seek my council to do, to try to draw together those who want to help and try to help them to, work through communities up to government. There is a complete lack of anything coming out of Home Office or the Foreign Office. I'm instructing my guys to work to the Ukrainian embassy at the moment, but I have to say we need our government to pick this up and to give guidance, to give some help to us to try to help our communities. I fully appreciate they are probably overwhelmed with actually trying to put resource into discreetly, and I don't want to know about what they're providing to the Ukrainians, and I don't want that because I want to know that they're doing it, but I don't want it publicly known. But what I think we are lacking is that direct contact. But I'm occupying too much of the time again, and I would ask, Justin, you've asked for this, please give it a shot.
Thank you, Chair. So I've just shared by emails a briefing that I wrote about 10 days ago now. Your DPHs have it, and it kind of just sets out a bit of the baseline health of the Ukrainian population. And the reason I did this is often these kind of circumstances, our immediate response, as Chair has described, is the very visceral emotive response to countries torn apart by conflict. And we think about the immediate arrival pressures of refugees and how we respond to that. And that work is going on already. But sometimes we don't think about the kind of longer term or the baseline health that underpins those populations. So what this briefing just does is pull together some of the headlines. And I think the key things to think about for us over the coming weeks as this goes on, because sadly I think it's highly unlikely it will end quickly, is that the Ukrainian health system was very underdeveloped, that there was significant effort internationally from the UN, WHO to support establishing a baseline health system, but that had really only started in 2020. So they don't have an established screening program. Uptake of childhood immunizations is very poor. It was a mixed economy of private health insurance, which most people couldn't afford. It's important to remember Ukraine is one of the poorest countries in Europe. And their life expectancy is significantly lower. In fact, it's 10 years lower than the life expectancy in Birmingham. And as many of you know, we're some of the worst in the region. Of those dying, it is chronic disease like cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease. Some of that is occupational, some of that is behaviour related. A lot of it seems to be related to a lack of access to treatment, medication, early intervention. So the reason I share this and flag this is ultimately when we see arrivals coming, we will be more risk to them than they are to us, particularly because they're very unvaccinated against COVID and we still have a lot of Omicron going round. They will have very poor baseline health to start with. And as health and wellbeing boards, I think we will need to think about the things that we are doing for our general populations and have done, and can we translate them into Ukrainian or Russian, which are the two dominant languages? Have we looked at translation services? Have we looked at how we make some of those wider interventions applicable and supporting these populations as they arrive in the country? So I just thought it was useful to share that, because I think often there's a lot of work going on very quickly about the immediate response, but as they arrive, and I think there is lessons learned about, we didn't quite get our head around this for the Afghan arrivals. We were good in the acute, but the longer term impacts, and I know Councillor Grinsell, having spoken with Ruth this morning, the tail is long in terms of what it means, and we haven't quite got there in the headspace yet.
That's tremendously helpful. Justin, can we share this with our DPHs? Really helpful. Mike.
Briefly, I think Justin's focus is absolutely right, and the paper is incredibly helpful. I think there's another part to this, which is about in our own populations, as we do start to feel more of the economic pinch, which is in no way comparable to what people in Ukraine are experiencing. We possibly could see more hate crime at Eastern European communities in more general, and I think we just need to be monitoring and primed to support in that area also.
Absolutely right. And what I would, I mean, I've got a full council meeting next Tuesday. I've got a notice of motion of support for the Ukrainians and for the government. All of that. I know what the Ukrainian population is in Warwickshire. I know what the Russian population is in Warwickshire. There is anxiety that there's anything that happens between them. So we have a role to play, all of us, in this. I think, we are wisely doing this, well, helpfully doing it on the back of how we've worked together over COVID, and quite honestly, there's value in sharing those emergency plans and how we might respond in the course of time. Particularly, I would suggest our DPHs around immunisation programmes, etc., and health capacity to manage any incomers as well. And yeah, it's desperate. So, who would have thought 80 years of peace in Europe thrown away in a minute? Okay. Can I thank, I've had a really great morning with you all, and hopefully we will have some of us in person next time. Date to be confirmed. Thank you so much for your attendance and your thoughts and ideas today, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.